One city sinks 19 inches a year. Another clings to life 12,000 feet up. A third spends millions every winter just to dig itself out. Seriously, why build there at all? And yet, some of these places have been standing for over 1,000 years. These are the most difficult cities to build. And if you like these weekly map videos, make sure you hit subscribe. That way I can justify all the hours I spend staring at maps, instead of spending time with my family. Starting with number 50, Venice. City of canals, bridges that make you sigh, and gondola rides that make you wonder if swimming would have been cheaper. In 452, Attila the Hun took a trip to northern Italy. Instead of sightseeing, he sacked the place. The residents of nearby Roman cities had a grim choice: beg for mercy or try their luck in the Venetian lagoon. They chose the lagoon. Builders hammered millions of wooden stakes into the lagoon floor. Physics did the heavy lifting and turned them into stone, like nature's concrete. 4 centuries later, real buildings appeared. A long project, yeah, and it's still not finished. The city is sinking by about 0.08 inches every year. Italy has gone full King Canute, throwing billions at flood defenses. Maybe they can turn the tides, though history suggests the tide usually wins. Number 49. Some cities are no-brainers. Miami isn't. Sure, the Miami River runs through it. The Biscayne Bay makes for a great port, but it was also a swamp. When it was incorporated as a city in 1896, there were only 368 people. Quietest spring break ever. Henry Flagler, the Standard Oil tycoon, wasn't impressed. Julia Tuttle, who owned the land, didn't care. When the Great Freeze of 1894-95 destroyed crops up north, hers kept growing. That was all it took to convince Flagler to lay rail tracks south. Nothing sells a city quite like not freezing to death. Sands were dredged, marshlands filled, and Miami appeared from the mud. Today, it's home to leathery retirees, sunburned party bros, and real estate agents with stronger SPF than morals. Makes you wonder, was it really worth it? Unlike this next city on the list. Number 48. In 1833, as America pushed west, a new city appeared in Illinois. The natives called it, as best as I can pronounce it, Shikakonki, which means either skunk or wild onion. Neither exactly screams prime real estate, but people moved in anyway. Like Miami, the city was Wetland, with only about 350 people living there. But by the end of the century, it was a sprawling metropolis of 1.7 million. Why? It might have been a swamp, but it was a good one. The kind that Shrek would call home. It was perfectly placed between the Great Lakes and the Mississippi watershed. You could even reach it by boat all the way from the Atlantic, if you didn't mind the skunky onion smell. But it took a lot of grunt work. Europeans had eyed the spot since the 1600s, but no one had the money or the patience to bother with it. That changed with the Industrial Revolution. Engineers raised streets, dug sewers, and even forced the Chicago River to flow backward, which is about as petty as it sounds. Number 47. As if building a city on a bog wasn't bad enough, try doing it in the middle of a war. In 1703, Peter the Great declared that Russia had a new capital, but it was technically in enemy territory. It was a fort captured from Sweden. It might have been full of mud, but to Peter, it was perfect. A shiny new port to deal with Europe. So he went all in. Peasants, prisoners of war, convicts, anyone with a pulse got drafted. They dug with their hands, slept in shacks, and froze in the mud. By 1712, with the war still going, Peter moved his court there anyway. No one knows how many people died building the city, but it was likely between 20 and 30,000. Number 46. The Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was founded in 1325 on 2 islands in Lake Texcoco. Not exactly a prime site for growth, but middle-age problems call for middle-age solutions. They built their own artificial islands, and then stitched them together into a city. Causeways linked it to the mainland and kept the salt water out. Against all odds, the engineering worked. What didn't work was stopping Hernán Cortés, whose conquistadors leveled the place. Turns out you can beat nature, but not smallpox and pointy swords. Spain built Mexico City on the ruins and decided to drain the lake. It was glacial work. By the 20th century, 45 rivers ran through the city. But it came at a hidden cost. The city sits on unstable clay, and it's sinking by almost 19 inches a year. Basically, my last souffle attempt, but on an urban scale. Number 45, New Orleans didn't start as pure swamp. It was high and dry in the early 18th century, but to become the Big Easy, over 30,000 acres had to be drained. That only happened in the late 19th century with better levees and pumps, and the job dragged on until 1926. But it came with a cost. 50% of the city is now below sea level. One bad day for the levees would spell disaster. That came in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina. New Orleans had to spend $20 billion for a whopping 350 miles of new levees, the world's most expensive water wings. Number 44, Berlin is the center of the world's third biggest economy. But ever wondered where that name came from? It's from the Slavic beryl, which means, that's right, swamp. Berlin has nearly 4,200 miles of inland waterways, more than any other city in Europe. Dig for a few feet and you'll hit groundwater, plus a delightful mix of sludge, peat, and sand. Building here is about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. It took some major engineering to get the city up and running, and being Germany, the brewers got involved. In the 1840s, they built the first big underground structures for beer, naturally. Fermentation came first, canals came later. Priorities. If you spot pink or purple pipes snaking through the streets, that's Berlin's temporary drainage system, basically giant pool noodles keeping construction sites from drowning. Number 43, one of Germany's other major cities was also built on a marsh. Seriously, what's the attraction? Charlemagne ordered a fort to be built in 808 on rocky ground. Seemed like a solid plan, literally. Wedged between the Ulster and Elbe rivers, it guarded against Slavic invasion. The problem? Hamburg's been fighting the land and water ever since. Even now, Hamburg's projects like Hafen City sit on flood-secure plinths. Hamburg, the Venice of Germany. Hamburg had its share of setbacks, though. A massive fire tore through the city on May 5th, 1842. A third of the hard-built city was left in ruins. Then there was the whole Allied bomber redevelopment plan during the war. Number 42. Paris wasn't built entirely on a swamp, so that's progress. But pump the brakes, I said entirely. One of its trendiest neighborhoods, La Mare, used to be one. First a playground for nobility, then a commercial hub after the revolution. Now it's a cultural center. Monks drained it in the 9th century. Then Louis VII had another go later. If they hadn't, it would probably still be the edge of Paris. Instead, it's now prime central real estate. Not bad for a former marsh, though compared to London, this is nothing. Number 41. The Romans founded Londinium, Britain's future capital, at a crossing on the Thames. Smart choice, if it wasn't for the wetlands. So they drained it. After the Romans bailed in 410, the swamps made a comeback, but not for long. Channeling their inner soccer hooligans, medieval Londoners took on the bogs, acre by acre. By the Victorian era, more than 200 miles of walls lined the Thames from Teddington to the North Sea. The river was squeezed from a wide, shallow sprawl into a deeper, narrower channel. So the super alpha city was once a bog? Explains why the finance bros feel right at home. So far, we've had a stilt city sinking lower than its tourists' wallets, a quagmire sold as spring break, and a town that flipped a river out of boredom. Let's keep this city planner fever dream rolling. Number 40, another one of the world's super alpha cities. It was once a mosquito-infested marsh. At least, the most famous part was. Old maps of New York are full of new-made ground, which is a polite way of saying marsh we stuffed dirt into. It still took 200 years to find fresh water. After half-baked schemes, outright hoaxes, and a cholera outbreak, the Croton Aqueduct opened in 1842. The city threw a huge party that October, celebrating water without the death flavor. Number 39, protecting Beijing meant turning a swamp into an engineering project. Tired of northern invasions, China wrapped Beijing in massive walls. The southeast perimeter was trickier. Low-lying marshes forced the wall into an odd diagonal. It was Beijing's way of sidestepping the problem. The northwestern perimeter was waterlogged too. Walls went up and then had to be abandoned for another diagonal. That left a neat little triangle of land outside the city. Engineers diverted spring water from Yuchuan and Baichuan to carve moats and fill the 3 lakes for the imperial gardens. If you're fighting quagmires, you may as well make them decorative. Without the walls and the water features, Beijing wouldn't have lasted as China's capital since 1421. It's too close to the steppe, where invasions showed up like Amazon deliveries. Daily, expensive, and impossible to stop. Number 38, Shanghai started to spring to life in 991 in what's now the Songjiang district. For a while, it grew slowly and steadily to about 12,000 by the early 1100s, but in just a few years, it would boom to over 250,000, thanks to Jurchen invasions to the north. The population changed fast, the land didn't. As it built outward and upward, Shanghai started to sink. By the early 20th century, it was sinking at a rate of almost 1 inch a year. Things have stabilized since 2010. But no rising sea levels threaten its 24 million residents. The solution? Sponge City. It's not a SpongeBob spinoff. It's a billion-dollar plan to use plants and soil to soak up water instead of just pipes. Number 37. Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, has always been one of the world's trickiest cities. Founded in the 17th century by Dutch colonists, it was supposed to be tropical Amsterdam. Instead of red lights and smoky cafes, they got mountains and rain. Constant streams flowed downward, and they had to get rid of them. Canals were built to cope, but within years, the city was drowning in rain, tropical heat, and the extra pollution the colonists kindly imported. So, the Dutch just moved south to the Menteng area. The canals are still there, plugged beneath concrete or acting as drainage channels. Today, parts of the city are sinking up to 6 inches a year. In some spots, it's over 13 feet. It's gotten so bad, the Indonesian government decided the only way to fix was to pack up. They're building a new capital, Nusantara, safely out of the splash range. Number 36. Lagos, Nigeria, is sort of the Venice of Africa because it was also built on a lagoon. It started with just 28,000 people, but wetlands meant the British had to drain the land to grow. For a while, it worked. Today, it's Africa's biggest city with over 20 million residents, an entire country crammed onto one swamp. Keeping it that way, that's another story. Today, rain floods the streets and beaches erode fast. Without wetlands, there's nothing left to soak up water or stop the waves. Keeping the city above ground will take massive, costly engineering projects. Have they heard of Noah's Ark? Just asking. Number 35. Bangkok was always going to be a great city. Perched at the top of the Bay of Bangkok, its strategic location is obvious, but most of the area was wetlands. But this sort of hard-won success came at a cost. The city was around 5 feet below sea level, and that ground is soft clay. High-rise buildings in the 1970s added more weight, and those canals, a lot of them have been filled in, so water from frequent rains can't go anywhere. So, Bangkok has no choice but to build even more, like anti-flood parks that can drain up to 1 million gallons of water. Still, the city's water woes have made some Thai government officials talk about moving the capital, much like Indonesia is doing. Number 34. Mumbai is one of the world's megacities. Population, 21.7 million. The city was originally 7 islands when Portugal took over in the 16th century. It took until 1845 to fill them. Nothing like a fixer-upper. Before then, it was so inhospitable Portugal handed the colony to Britain as part of Charles II's wedding. Beats a toaster kettle set, I guess. But even he couldn't be bothered to govern it. Instead, it was rented to the East India Company for £10 in gold a year, the worst Airbnb deal in history. Life didn't get easier. In 1689, the Mughals laid siege and wiped out most of the infrastructure. But the city recovered, only to face another big challenge today. It has sandy soil, not so good for the weight of modern buildings, and the population is stressing it further by depleting groundwater. Dealing with that sandy soil will be the next major infrastructure challenge here. And it doesn't have centuries. Mumbai is sinking at a rate of 2 to 3 millimeters a year and could be 40% underwater by 2050. But not all cities were hard to build because of where they were. More like what they were doing. Number 33, Washington, D.C. wasn't exactly built on a swamp. For once. Washington himself was a surveyor. He picked a solid riverbank for the capital. Building on it? That was another story. Pierre L'Enfant dreamed of turning the wilderness into a grand city, but he refused to share his plans and got booted. The city limped along under Andrew Ellicott until 1902, when L'Enfant's designs were rediscovered. The Macmillan Commission promptly redid the National Mall according to them. See? Urban planning works when your architect lets everyone in on the plan. Changes of plans can lead to a lot of cost overruns, but it's nothing compared to what LA dealt with. Number 32. LA wasn't built in a desert, but it made one. The area was so good, everyone wanted in on it. There were almost 1,700 people there in 1841. 50 years later, it was over 100,000. By 1920, 500,000. The population outgrew the area's natural water supply. Something had to be done, and fast. So Mayor Fred Eaton cooked up a plan. He'd steal it from the Owens Valley. That led to the California Water Wars. Farmers fought back, sometimes with dynamite. But by 1913, the aqueduct was done. Owens Lake was dust by 1924. The revolt fizzled out by 1931. LA got the water, the farmers got nothing, and the city became America's second biggest. Moral of the story? In California, water beats everything, even TNT. Number 31. Las Vegas wasn't carved out of the desert so much as dropped onto a lucky oasis. The name Las Vegas means the meadows, but meadows don't make a metropolis. Mormons gave it a shot in the 1850s and bailed. Faith alone won't keep you hydrated. Like Miami, it started with a woman. Helen Stewart bought up land to sell to the railroads. The trains arrived, and Las Vegas was official in 1905. But it would take more than tracks and timetables to turn an oasis into Sin City. Hoover Dam broke ground in 1931, creating Lake Mead. Today, it still supplies 90% of Vegas's water. The project hit the jackpot. More money was flowing into casinos than concrete. Nevada legalized gambling to keep California's cash from heading home. We've learned that Beijing dodged invasions with walls, Shanghai is turning into Sponge City, and Jakarta is sinking so badly the government's building itself a getaway. What surprised you so far? Let me know in the comments. Number 30. Bishop, California is dry. Like, really dry. The nearby Sierra Nevada mountains block the rain, so the town had to get creative. It gets water from 3 wells in the Owens Valley. The wells have almost 22 miles of water mains. It's a clever setup, but it traps the city. Bishop had just 3,800 people in 2020 and was shrinking. To grow, it would need a reclamation project on par with building Dubai. You know, minus the oil money and, porta potties. Number 29. Bakersfield. It only has 144.7 millimeters of rain a year. So where does it get its water? It sort of takes a village of different methods. If just one of them wasn't there, Bakersfield could have never become what it is, with a population of about 400,000. There's a lot in the ground. Wells supply 36% of the city's needs, but it took some engineering to get water to this dry place too. Enter the California Aqueduct, which supplies 26% of the water. Federal water projects like the Friant-Kern Canal and Central Valley Project supply another 12%. Without these things, the Kern River, which supplies another 20%, wouldn't be nearly enough to do the job. Number 28, Phoenix isn't quite as extreme as Bakersfield, but it does have a much bigger challenge. It has 5 million people in its metro area. So, like in Bakersfield, it had to get creative when it came to water. 34% of Phoenix's water is groundwater. That wouldn't cut it for the current population. So, the city pulls 29% of water from the Colorado River, 25% from the Salton Verde, and 12% from reclaimed water. It's a careful balancing act built on dams, treaties with neighbors, and laws to conserve groundwater. Somehow, it worked. Arizona uses the same amount of water today as it did in the 1950s, despite having 7 times the people. Proof that with enough bureaucracy and concrete, you can give a desert an identity crisis. Number 27. Sanaa's water problems might be the most challenging in the world. It's the capital of Yemen, with a population of 3.4 million. The Houthi-occupied city is in a desert, and it has an elevation of nearly 7,400 feet, one of the highest cities in the world. Getting water there isn't easy. In the 1970s, groundwater was about 99 feet below the surface. Today, it's dropped to almost 4,000 feet in some areas. Long before the Houthis arrived, people were worried this could be the first capital to run out of water. The World Bank and UN built 3.7 miles of twin pipes to help, but with the city's geography and politics, it's basically a drop in the ocean, minus the water. Sanaa might have been around since the 1st century, but keeping it around might be one of the biggest challenges in the 21st. Number 26. No desert town has a tougher challenge than Arica in the Atacama, the driest desert on Earth. How dry? Average annual rainfall is only 0.03 inches. All the water goes into the mountains, leaving Arica low and dry. Some parts haven't seen rain for 500 years. But Arica has an advantage. It's on the coast, so it can build desalination plants. This is expensive, though, so Arica has to go the extra mile and import water. It's also built infrastructure to capture whatever rain it can. The result? Arica has a population of over 200,000, and life is pretty normal. It's been around since 1541, after all. Plenty of time to get used to the idea that rain is just a rumor. Number 25. Like Las Vegas, Timbuktu was built on an oasis. The Niger River kept it alive, and the salt trade kept it rich. But isolation and desert heat made building tough. Imports were rare, so much of the town rose from mud brick. Cheap, but quick to erode under constant sandstorms. Even today, there are no modern roads. The donkey is still the local Uber. There's an airport today, so that makes things easier, but now the desert is after revenge, and the Niger River is shrinking. Upkeep is harder than ever. On top of that, insurgents have taken over the city since August of 2023. Food prices keep climbing, and 33,000 people have already fled. For a place built on salt, it's got more than enough wounds to rub it into. Number 24. The Australians have had different desert problems. Go to Coober Pedy and you'll come across buildings that look normal, but looks can be deceiving. The rooms lead underground. That's right, the mole people are real. No, not really. People live below because when the mercury hits 126 degrees Fahrenheit, air conditioning throws in the towel. It wasn't an easy place to build. The residents did it the old-fashioned way, with pickaxes, shovels, and boomsticks. Fortunately, there were some abandoned mine shafts to act as a starting point. How do you keep life going underground? 70% of the energy comes from wind and solar. Water's piped in from 15 miles away. It works. There's 2,500 people living there as of 2022, but it's not exactly a model ready to franchise worldwide. Number 23, Perth. Most cities exist because they connect to others. Perth missed that memo. With 2.3 million people, it's the world's most isolated big city. 2 days across the Nullarbor Plains just to reach Adelaide. It's civilization on airplane mode. So, how did it grow? It all began with a telegraph line in 1869, but things didn't really kick off until after World War II. Even then, it took a yacht to help. In 1983, the Australia 2 yacht won the America's Cup race, putting Perth on the map. A mining boom in the 2000s swelled the population, and city leaders jumped on it. They poured money into long-term projects like Perth Arena and Optus Stadium. The strategy paid off, as it now has 79% of Western Australia's population. Number 22, Perth has nothing on Iquitos, Peru, the world's least accessible city. You can only get there by boat or plane, and it's not some remote village. It's home to 491,000 people. So how did it get so big? It only had a population of 1,500 in the 1870s, but by 1880, it was 20,000. It was all thanks to a rubber boom big enough to lure Gustave Eiffel to build the Casa de Fierro. But the good times didn't last. By 1912, foreign businessmen figured out rubber plants grew in easier places. The boom deflated as fast as a punctured tire. And yet, the population continued to grow. Its location actually proved a tourist attraction. It was the biggest base for exploring the Amazon, so it still attracts all sorts of adventurers ready to spend. The lesson: geography and luck can turn even the most desolate patch of land into a construction site. Just don't bet it all on rubber. We've seen how cities face danger from being too low, but building high isn't an easy answer either. Number 21. Denver sits a mile high. Higher in some spots, and it all started in 1858 with gold prospectors. It stayed small until the railroads arrived in the 1870s. By 1890, it had 100,000 people, but when it came to roads, it was a different story. I-25 didn't open until 1948, with federal money and 20 bridge rebuilds to make it work. Now, with the population up 40% this century to 715,000, the city is scrambling again. High elevation, low funding, public-private partnerships are the new fix. Even at a mile high, Denver's problems are still at street level. Okay, we've had Arica treating rain like a fairy tale, Timbuktu still running on donkey power, and Coober Pedy going full mole people just to beat the heat. And we still have altitude problems, even more desert cities, and a casualty of war still to come. Number 20. Xining in China is Asia's highest city. It's about 2,000 feet higher than Denver. Over 2.4 million people live there. Since it's in the Huangshi River Valley, water is easy to come by. But that doesn't mean it was easy to build. Find Xining on a map and it sits dead center in China. Getting there was never easy. Today, you can hop a train to Urumqi in 4 to 5 hours. Honestly, it's a minor miracle. Freezing air, thin oxygen, and earthquakes aren't exactly commuter-friendly. In 1927, one quake hit 7.7 and killed over 40,000. Despite these challenges, the city goes on. Its location makes it too important for Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. Number 19, Addis Ababa is Africa's highest city, at just over 7,700 feet. But that wasn't done out of choice, as much as luck. It was founded in 1886 when Emperor Menelik II realized his old base in the Entoto Hills was too steep for a railroad. So he moved here instead. Conveniently, his wife already had a house there, the 1800s version of, "Honey, let's just use your place." Because the new capital was unplanned, Addis Ababa grew slowly and chaotically. Moving in together is never easy. Bureaucrats squabbled for years. Then Mussolini invaded in the 1930s. He had big development dreams, but conquering Ethiopia turned out to be harder than making trains run on time. Real growth only came after World War II, but challenges remain. Corruption is rife, and China's involvement has many wondering if the city traded the swamp for a debt trap. Kinda like my career trajectory. Number 18, Bogota. Colombia's capital is over 8,500 feet high, and building infrastructure here is challenging. Steep slopes and narrow paths make roads in Colombia hard to build and quick to crumble. A 186-mile trip takes 7 hours here. In Spain, it's half that. No wonder Bogota boasts the worst traffic jams in the Americas. Basically, the mountains move before you do. To make things worse, there's little rail support, but that might be changing after 80 years. Bogota planned to build a metro system, but they were still in development hell for decades. Construction only began in 2021. But despite the challenges, Bogota still has 8 million people. Number 17. Cochabamba was founded in the 16th century at nearly 8,400 feet. The soil was good, so it thrived as farmland, but modern infrastructure has struggled to keep up. The San Jose Dam from the 1950s gave the water city, but for a much smaller population. Today's residents have mid-century plumbing for a 21st century city. Water use got so bad that in the 2000s, privatization sparked huge protests. Prices soared, people revolted, and privatization was rolled back, though the water problems stayed. Now, Cochabamba is pitching itself as a future tech hub, but at 8,400 feet and iffy water, it's hard to code when you're out of breath and plumbing. Number 16. Quito, Ecuador's capital, stands at a whopping 9,350 feet. It has 1.7 million people. Build this high, and problems come with the altitude. It was found in 1534, but even 500 years hasn't solved the geography. In July of 2025, a landslide snapped a water pipe and cut service to 400,000 residents. Subtropical climate or not, at this height, Quito's biggest challenge is keeping the taps on. Quito relies almost entirely on high-altitude shrublands for water, fragile areas threatened by mining and bad farming. By the 1990s, shortages hit hard enough that the city had to call in the Nature Conservancy for help. It worked, but also proved the point. At this height, there's no room for error. Your water supply is basically one bad harvest away from disappearing. Number 15. La Paz, Bolivia, has an elevation of 12,000 feet. Despite that, over 2 million people live in the metro. The Spanish tried settling here, but the terrain was so hostile that nothing stuck until 1548. Building roads at that altitude was brutal, and the ones that did get built were narrow. The result? La Paz has been in a traffic jam for about 500 years. The answer? Go higher. In 2012, La Paz built the Mi Teleférico cable car system, finished in 2014. Now, 10 lines carry over 200,000 people a day. Now the commute comes with the view and altitude sickness. This next city really lives up to its name. Number 14. El Alto in Bolivia sits just over 13,600 feet. It's the highest major city in the world with almost 1.2 million people. Why did it even start? No one lived there until 1903. El Alto began as a slum for La Paz, while the wealthier stuck to the cushier valley below. Then, waves of rural migrants poured in, swelling the population. Geography was tough, resources were thin, just like the air. El Alto had to learn the hard way how to be a city. As late as 1997, only a third of El Alto's residents had paved streets or trash pickup. Sewage access was about 20%. In some places, it's closer to 2%. Now, retreating glaciers threaten the water supply too. Apparently, living on a mountain wasn't challenging enough. But there is one big win. The La Paz cable cars extend into El Alto. It's the longest such line in the world and far quicker than the 3-mile death trip down a canyon by car. Number 13. El Alto might be the highest major city, but there's an even higher settlement in Peru. Welcome to the boomtown of La Rinconada, at a height of 16,700 feet. A gold rush in the 2000s sent the population soaring by 235%. By 2009, around 30,000 people lived there. Proof that people will climb literally miles into the sky if there's gold waiting. La Rinconada has no real water or sanitation. Glacier runoff is the only source, which is good. But it's laced with mercury from mining, which is bad. Even the rain is toxic. Crime is rampant too. So, in 2024, the government's big fix was 18 cameras and 15 guard booths. Turns out, Batman doesn't fight crime at 16,700 feet. Number 12. When you think of mountaintops, you often think of snow. And Aomori, Japan has plenty of it. It's the world's snowiest city, with 26 feet of snowfall a year. It's not the highest or coldest city, but wedged between the Hakoda Mountains and Mutsu Bay, it gets slammed with colliding winds that dump snow all winter. Not as cold as the next city on our list, but still, when your January record high is 13.5 degrees Fahrenheit, you're basically living in a freezer aisle. Keeping the city running means burning cash on snow, about $35 million a season for trucks alone. Add seawater sprinklers on roads and rails, a 120-person crew just for the airport, and even heated streets in some spots, and still, none of it works without constant community shoveling. Around here, a snow shovel isn't a tool, it's a roommate. Number 11. The coldest major city in the world is Yakutsk in Russia's Sakha Republic. The average low temperature in winter is negative 80.9 degrees Fahrenheit. But there are 355,000 people crazy enough to live there, and serving them hasn't been easy. Yakutsk sits on permafrost nearly a mile deep. You can't just drop buildings on it. Heat melts the ground. So the city was built on piles, like a popsicle version of Venice. It took plenty of trial and error. Soviet efficiency means rebuilding twice. Even today, houses need endless repairs. Getting to Yakutsk is just as brutal. Siberia is isolation on steroids, and the Amur-Yakutsk mainline from Tinda to Nizhny Bestyakh has been plagued by, you guessed it, permafrost problems. Even the trains freeze in their tracks. Now, we know that La Paz fixes traffic with the world's biggest ski lift. In El Alto, sewage access is a luxury item, and people will literally live on toxic ice if there's gold in it. We've hit our top 10, so let's get out of the freezer and back into the fire. Number 10. In 2024, Doha, Qatar became the hottest city in the world. Average temperatures hit 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Oil wealth meant it became a metropolis of over 1.1 million. But that didn't mean building it was easy. The spot wasn't great. Desalination plants had to cover the water needs. Shallow seas kept port access limited until a deep port arrived in the 1970s. Illegal construction is still a headache. But pile on enough resources, and even a desert outpost can turn into a sprawling city. Number 9. When it comes to extremes, Manila would be happy with just one. Instead, post-World War II migration packed 25 million people into the metro, over 111,000 people per square mile. That's not a city, that's a human Jenga tower. Manila has never kept up with the influx. Residents rely on thousands of illegal wells for water. The housing boom wiped out nearly all its mangroves from over 133,000 acres to under 1,200. The city traded its natural flood defense for real estate, swapping life jackets for condos. That's why Manila is sinking at up to 4 inches a year. At the same time, sea levels are rising 1 inch. Manila will likely need coastal defenses just to stay afloat, and it still can't build housing fast enough. At this rate, the city might run out of land before it runs out of people. It's gotten so bad that former President Duterte hinted at pulling in Indonesia and moving the capital. Nothing more on that yet. Number 8, take Manila's problems and put them on steroids. That's Dhaka, Bangladesh. Its problems might literally sink it. It's subsiding at 0.5 inches a year. In the 1970s, Dhaka grew to a metro area that now has over 20 million people, with 2,000 more still coming every day. It's the world's biggest game of sardines. Bad planning drained the groundwater and turned old canals into sewers that sometimes need to be cleared by hand. Workers have even drowned in the sewage trying to unblock them, possibly the worst job on Earth. But hey, at least Manila can still boast about having schools. Number 7. Monrovia, Liberia's capital, has a population of over 1.7 million, and it has a much different problem than anything covered so far. It's one of the world's poorest places. 85% of the population lives on less than $1 a day. The gross national income is only $790 a year. For all its size, building Monrovia is a constant struggle. Power cuts make ATMs and card readers feel like luxury tech. Only a third of residents can flush a toilet, though given the state of the sanitation system, that's more of a gamble than a privilege. Even education is an uphill fight. Years of conflict with Sierra Leone drained Monrovia's resources so badly that schools barely function, and the cycle shows no sign of ending. There's another cycle that makes some cities hard to build, though. They've had an unfortunate history of being destroyed. Number 6. Pyongyang was once the site of almost total devastation. In June of 1950, UN forces dropped more bombs on the city than there were people. 420,000 for its 400,000 residents. 32,000 tons of napalm were used. 75% of the city was destroyed in the campaign. It was rebuilt after the war, brick by brick. Since then, the city has gone from strength to strength. Nah, Just kidding. Number 5. If you want to see one of the most heavily destroyed cities in World War II, don't look to Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Look to Poland's capital, Warsaw. Warsaw was the first European capital to fall under Nazi occupation, but the locals didn't take it quietly. They revolted, with a major uprising in 1944 following the Warsaw Ghetto uprising the year before. Hitler saw enough. He ordered for the city to completely disappear from the surface of the earth. By the time the Red Army liberated it in January, 85% of the city was rubble. Liberation came with a 40-year communist hangover, but Warsaw outlasted it all. Today, 3.2 million people live in the metro, the centerpiece of Poland's post-Cold War economic miracle. Proof that even a city reduced to ashes can bounce back. Number 4, Tokyo sits on the Pacific's Ring of Fire. So daily life feels like living on a plate of jello. But nothing stopped September 1st, 1923. The Great Kanto earthquake, magnitude 8, killed over 100,000 and nearly leveled half the city. The city was rebuilt, only to be flattened again in 1945, when American bombers dropped 453 tons of incendiaries. 100,000 were killed, and 51% of Tokyo burned to the ground. The city got demolished twice before it even had a skyline. Rebuilding after the earthquake cost the equivalent of $85 million today. After World War II, Japan's economic miracle helped ease the burden. Planners focused on infrastructure and let locals shape their own backyards. The result? Modern Tokyo rebuilt from ruin into a patchwork of distinct neighborhoods. It's proof that even chaos can be well organized. So, Manila swapped its mangroves for condos, Dhaka played the world's worst game of sardines and sewage, and Pyongyang got bombed harder than it was built. Can anything be more difficult than that? Well, yeah. It's time for our top 3. Number 3, Magdeburg in Germany's Saxony-Anhalt has around 244,000 people. But it's basically a 3-time phoenix. The first wipeout came in 1207 when a massive fire torched much of the city, cathedral included. Round 2 came on May 20th, 1631, during the 30 Years' War. Protestant Magdeburg fell to the Catholic League, whose troops showed no mercy. 20,000 residents were killed and the city was reduced to ash. It took 200 years to recover, just in time to be destroyed all over again. On January 16, 1945, British and American aircraft launched a massive air raid. Over 90% of the city was destroyed. But Magdeburg was rebuilt once again. Intel plans to build its largest plant in Europe there in 2027. Here's hoping they also invest in a bomb, fire, and war-proof umbrella. Number 2. Ypres sat right on World War I's front line. Bad real estate, if there ever was. In 1914, Germany tried to use it to encircle Paris, but got stopped with British help. What followed were 3 brutal battles of Ypres, hundreds of thousands dead, and the city becoming infamous as the site of the first large-scale chemical attacks. Ypres got a starring role in the war no one wanted. Its medieval cloth hall St. Martin's Cathedral and much of its heritage were leveled, making it the most heavily damaged city of the war. Almost all of it had to be rebuilt just in time for the Nazi occupation in World War II. Today, so much has been restored that you'd hardly know. A quiet reminder of just how stubborn people can be. From one war-torn city to another, number 1, Baghdad's been around since the 8th century, and it quickly became the crown jewel of the Islamic Golden Age. For centuries, it was one of the world's great cities, until it all came to a catastrophic end. The Mongols paid a visit in 1258 and showed Baghdad no mercy. More than 200,000 people were killed or enslaved. The city was burned to the ground, and the legendary House of Wisdom was emptied into the Tigris, turning the river black with ink. Baghdad clawed its way back, only to be besieged again by Timur, the Ottomans, and plenty more after that. Today, over 8 million people live there. If nothing else, Baghdad has perfected the art of resilience. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.